This is Cohesion Concepts and Contexts, where we unpack and explore everything from architecture to the human experience around design. I'm Matthew Goldstein. In today's episode, we revisit the origin story of the multi-disciplinary designer Malek Alqadi, joined in conversation with the human design field expert John Buffini.
Thanks, Matthew. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. My name is John Buffini. I have been 20 years immersed in the human design experience. Myself and my 4 other brothers created the largest business coaching company in America. And over the last 10 years, I've been focused mostly on executives and the new corporate culture being our new villages. So I'm really enjoying my time. During my time, I had the opportunity to meet an architectural student that really made me stop in my tracks, because I spend my time around identifying people's abilities and gifts. And I was really struck by Malek and his promise. And so budding friendship started, and I got to be a witness to his history. I got to be a witness to the unveiling of who he has become. And if I take a second to champion and shout out Malek, I'm very proud of the Architectural Digest articles, the Dwell magazine features, being just featured for his remarkable designs, the incredible experiences that people have benefited from his designs in unique ways, distinctive ways. And I believe that most people are fascinated by the origins. How did somebody get started? Why was somebody interested in what they were interested in from the get-go? So first of all, I want to welcome Malek, and we're glad to have you here. You are known by many. Can you tell us more about yourself in your own words and experiences, like starting off with, what was your earliest memory of being inspired by architecture? How old were you? What transpired?
Hello, everyone. My name is Malek Alqadi. I was really inspired by Petra growing up in Jordan and being immersed within the Wadi Rum Desert off the coast of the Red Sea, and being surrounded by the ancient ruins of the Nabatean people, and having that as my backyard, and being able to explore that and the Dead Sea region all while growing up. I was probably around like 6 or 7 when I was really heavily influenced by those trips that we would take as a family.
Also, as the process started, so that was your first, you were how old when you went to Petra for the first time?
6 or 7 years old is usually like when we started taking those weekend trips out to Wadi Rum and out to Petra. And then my parents realized that there was, an interest there in regards to architecture and the influence of that. And then they wanted to keep that momentum going. And, that turned into Legos and drawings and building out what I saw in the real world through those Legos, and drawing up floor plans, even though there were various scales, whether it was the treasury in Petra, Jordan, or the Giza pyramids, or whatever it is that we were kind of going around in that Middle East region. And there were so many ancient ruins to be able to explore, from El Ula to, up to Syria. We did a lot of those driving trips, and being able to take those and get influenced by that, and then take that back home and implement that through my Lego blocks in my own room, and being able to build and creatively think for hours about how that would work. So it was all kind of intertwined.
Because you really are a citizen of the world, because growing up in Jordan and being influenced in such an ancient way, and then being transported to Florida, where you're suddenly, in elementary school. Do you remember your first tinkering with any kind of installation? I particularly remember a tiny project that you executed for your parents.
Yeah, so we went back and forth a lot from the Middle East, from the Emirates, from Jordan, and to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And so I grew up in between both of those places. So I became, Arabic is my first language, and then learned English. And from there, really still had the knack for architecture and design. Didn't really know what that meant or what it was as a profession, but I just really had an interest for building things. And I remember we had like this really big circular driveway, and I really wanted to help my mom with the landscape. She liked to plant and do all of these things, and I was so triggered to build a dual-sided water feature that was a small ecosystem where it could become this watering hole concept for the random ducks. If you live in Florida and you're from South Florida, you know that there's like literally ducks floating everywhere. People are always walking their dogs, and it's just this really cool idea that I thought that this could be like this really nice node for animals, for birds.
And just like as a word picture, you want to tell us how big and heavy this installation was?
Yeah, I mean, this was a pretty massive 45-foot long, 20-foot wide, dual-sided waterfall. It was like 4 feet high. It was undulating, all these like undulating rocks and stones that my dad and I went and got from an excavating site nearby from a development. It was all very much kind of like mom and pop put it together. I remember vividly around 4th of July weekend, we were building this, and it actually took 2 weeks, what we thought would take a few days, because it was around 3 palm trees. So it was a big endeavor to take on, had to figure out the elevation changes, had to figure out where the motors were going to go to be concealed. So there's all of this kind of moving parts, because we weren't using like chlorine or anything. So we really had to understand the water biology and just like the overall pH levels to make sure that everything was functioning like an ecosystem, and what we could do to help influence that growth from landscape to animals to overall health of this kind of organism that I looked at as a 14-year-old.
And several tons of raw materials.
Yeah.
That your parents believed in you, and as they should, because you ended up a really cool school out on the Pacific coast. We've all had some inspirational moments, with our formal education, experiences, relationships beyond that. I remember a pivotal moment for me early on in my career is we had Neil Armstrong come as a guest, and I'm like, our whole family sitting with him going, this is the first person to walk on another surface of the universe. And so I know personally that you've had some experiences, but I'd love you to expound on some of the people you've been inspired on, in college, after college, these incredible thought leaders that you've had to interact with and collaborate with.
Yeah, I think for me, just starting out right at the gates, it was something that, relating to someone like Zaha Hadid, being from the Middle East herself, and then growing into the architectural profession globally, and really kind of finding a niche that worked for her. And so that was really inspirational from that aspect. And then expanding my, palette and plethora of architects that I looked up to as I got into architecture school, with people like Frank Lloyd Wright, Peter Zumthor, and Rick Joy, Dillard Scofidio and Renfro, and really kind of diving in deeper into their works and the various scales and typologies that they've worked on, and how each tackled their own field, and the scales that they focused on, and how they did it really well. So that was really interesting for me.
Well, you've dropped some pretty impressive names there. Thinking of Illuminated Crater, for example. What I found interesting was you had a particular full circle moment with one of these designers from college to your professional life. Can you want to expound on that?
Yeah, we had a lot of, in architectural school, you had a lot of juries, you have a lot of lectures, and you try to be as involved as possible and be mentored by and influenced by these architects that come alongside you. And Bjarke Ingels at the time was coming out with the Yes Is More book, and I remember going to that lecture and getting that book, and it was, with my fellow classmates and listening in on narrating this like storyline on their projects, and taking what he was good at with his narrating and storytelling through comics. And I really enjoyed that lecture. And then 10 years later, I'm now in a book alongside him that came out earlier this year, which is, was really exciting to be published in the same on the same pages alongside him and be featured in the same project typology.
Yeah, I think his book was Yes and More, I think was his book that he signed because he made a personal note to you, and fast forward, you have the Yes and More, and then you're in the book. What's the book called that you're both in?
Yeah, it's called Cabin Fever. It was like exploring these like enchanting cabins, hideaways, and off the grid spaces and places all over the world. And one of my projects was alongside his. So it's a really great coffee table book, and it's filled with really talented works by architects and designers from all over the world.
Now, a lot of people, I've talked to tens of thousands of people over the years, a lot of people, go to college and they hope their degree will represent them, and they kind of leave it out there floating in cyberspace, as it were. What I found impressive about you was that not only did you leave college, when you left college, that you left college with a strategy for yourself, how you were going to position yourself to work on projects and collaborate with people. Could you expound on that a little bit? Like right after college, a lot of people are looking for a job interview. What were you looking for?
I was looking for something very specific in the sense that I wanted to be a well-versed designer and understand all aspects of the architectural field. And I knew that by going and doing all of these interviews during internship summers, when I had the chance to, and kind of getting understanding for various scales and studios, I really gravitated more towards the smaller scale studios because of all of the various tasks that you would be doing in a day and being exposed to as many facets of a project as possible. And so I knew that, as impressionable as I was at the time, it was really important for me to work with a smaller studio that was dynamic and that encouraged my design work and really propelled me to explore and push myself in all facets of the architectural field at all various phases. That way I could develop those skill sets to become a well-rounded designer. Because I think it's one thing.
Well-roundedness was you wanting to surround yourself with not only a design studio, but also to surround yourself with masterful people or excellent people in their field. Tell me about that.
Well, I think I had hints of this while I was in school, becoming somebody that can design something and explain myself through whether it's drawings or renderings, but then be able to realize those things. Because it's one thing to render something over and over again and create beautiful imagery, which I highly applaud the people that can do that. And I think it's a wonderful aspect of storytelling and narrating a concept through schematic design. But I do think it's really important to also be able to network and surround yourself with craftsmen that can help bring your vision to life and be able to explain yourself through whether it's drawing, conversation, detailing, overall general coordination and follow-up to be able to bring your vision to life and figure out how to compromise and negotiate with a lot of real life challenges from bringing something from a rendering to a real life space. I think that was such an important aspect for me to
and just to add a wrinkle onto this is not only in LA, a major metropolis, but you're having to be a creative person for leading creators in LA that are influencing the world. Can you tell us specifically about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting being a creative creator, creating spaces for people that were creating their own art in their respective fields, whether it was composing and producing shows or movies, Oscar-winning movies, screenwriting, amazing scripts that people all over the world know about, and even one of the biggest shows in the world, producing that. And so really trying to find how to communicate creatively, intellectually, understanding their perspectives on things and what they needed in their space to be able to produce creatively for others. And so it was really important for me to tap into that and understand their lifestyles, understand how they create, understand their day-to-day routines and who they are as people and what they were looking for. So then we were able to develop these sanctuaries for them in a hectic space like Los Angeles.
You're kind of minimizing developing a few sanctuaries. You got involved in some incredible projects with these creators. What was it like, your first solo project, jumping into, these mega budgets and ultra immersive experiences? Can you tell us a little bit about, working for these people?
Yeah, I think one of these bigger ground up projects was the largest project I brought into our design studio at the time. And it was with a really talented client who worked on amazing movies like Star Trek and X-Men and Bohemian Rhapsody and all of these phenomenal films and shows that had major cultural influence globally. And I submitted my design work to the client. He was very transparent about reaching out to multiple design studios around Los Angeles. And I just really believed in the site and the project and what he wanted to do. And I really figured out a way to create a very schematic design that had really brilliant floor plan layout, things that were multi-use spaces, and just pushing the envelope forward on what you could do in a traditional flat lot in West Hollywood, California, and be able to achieve that. And I think he was really stoked by that. And then, we ended up working together, and I then began designing that home for him and developing that whole concept, from film editing movie room to a screening room to having personal space, a study, a sanctuary for him a sanctuary with being able to walk on these like floating bridges and walkways to bring nature inwards and at the same time have privacy. So there's a lot of these kind of things.
We are going to count on this at further episodes. So I think that's enough of a teaser. But for me, it's fascinating to me that how intense of an experience it must be to be able to dive in, to like take the creative plunge with creators. What were some of your takeaways from these first chapters in your career? What was some things that you took away from this immersive experience that you were part of?
The fact that I was in a studio that allowed me to grow. I think my principal at the time, Sonny, he was just such a wonderful mentor and a teacher, and really believed in what I was doing. And I felt like I had a safety net to be able to stretch myself and to grow within the design process and push that envelope as much as I could, while I knew that I had a team having my back in regards to, the groundbreaking things that we were doing at the time. And I think it was really important to be able to do that, and then be able to collaborate with acoustic engineers, really complex mechanical systems, all of those moving parts seamlessly integrated within this like spine that went across this entire home. I think that was just like one aspect of it. And then being able to coordinate and, understand different personalities and mesh with different people and be able to develop that skill set, because that's really important.
Well, one of the things I found impressive, because I specialize in human design, is that you were able to communicate with people in a reference that they were wanting to communicate with you about, and then you're able to simplify complicated structures and water against foundations and water installations and bamboo trees. Incredible modern technology seamlessly hidden inside of spaces and projects that you worked on all those years. Your first big multi-million-dollar, high-tech, modern project. I'd love for you to share with people, how old were you when you took on your first big project?
I was about 23 years old when we started that project, and coming alongside clients and really growing that skill set and all those projects. Yeah, I was around 23.
It's absolutely remarkable. I think I might be nervous if a 23-year-old valet was parking my car. I'm not sure. It is incredible. And obviously during your 20s, you spent a lot of time designing. But what I also find particularly interesting is the things you did additionally to flesh out holistically who you were as a person, as a creator, as a designer. Can you expound on that a little bit?
I think it's really important to be a well-versed, versatile designer. I can't reiterate that enough. I think it's really important to have people skills, to be able to come alongside people, to not just be behind a computer screen, as important as that is. I think it's important to surround yourself with like-minded individuals, being able to network and really reach for people that think like you, that have the same vision and drive as you. I think it's really important to be able to collaborate and have those conversations, because that type of synergy and realizing those types of visions that you see for yourself and others is a really great way to be able to do that through collaboration. I think that to me is really important, being in a big metropolis like Los Angeles, and it could be a very niche pocket place. It's a big city, but it could also feel very alone. And I think being able to network with the right people, being able to do things outside of just work, like working out and taking weekend trips, which is such a wonderful thing in Southern California. And that's one of the nicest things here, is like the weather, first of all, and then being able to drive 2 hours in any direction and be in a completely different environment. And it triggered me a lot as growing up. We used to take all these smaller trips over the weekends to all of these places, and to be able to be up in the mountains, to be by the water, to be in the desert. I think those were all really important things, for sure.
And I think it's interesting that you've worked now, you've created projects in all of those terrains, from sand to snow, from beach to mountains and high deserts. Now, I remember a particular experience that you had that really expanded your base as a designer, as a thought leader. You poured yourself into, of course you poured yourself into projects, but you had a particular experience that started you thinking in a amplified way. Can you expound on that?
Yeah, I think when I was, creating for these Hollywood creators and getting inspired by them, appreciating the opportunities, and understanding the importance of their privacy, and really pouring myself into the process, but realizing that, these projects are going to be viewed by very few people, whether it's just the end user and their close friends and family, and realizing that it was only going to be seen by a limited audience. And that paradigm shift for me started to trigger, because it brought me back to my, thesis work and what I wanted to do in this, idea of cohesion and follies, and spaces where they're private spaces, but they blur the line between private and public, and being able to have multiple people experience it, whether it's for a weekend or not, instead of just a small pocket of people.
Now I can see, as a security gate slowly closes on a private residence, how you can have that awareness of wanting to expand to not only have honoring private clientele and having these public experiences. What's interesting to me is you started another hobby that you dragged me along into, and you might want to expand on that in terms of what was a new hobby you started to do once you realized you wanted to expand your creative influence.
Yeah, I think for me was those weekend trips, and dragging anyone that I could to come out with me and to go on property searches. People, window shop in malls, and I wanted to go look and window shop at properties, whether it was a small back alley lot somewhere in San Diego, or whether it was up in Idlewild or in Joshua Tree, wherever it was. And if it was somehow reachable, we were driving there and we were going there. And I think it was like I would map out a whole game plan of which point to go to which property, like we were actually going to buy them, just to be also inspired by things outside of the city, because LA could be, for somebody that's super young, it could be like a great place to start your career, but at the same time, it could be so hard to reach for anything because everything is so expensive. To realize something as expensive as a building or a structure, it's not cheap. And so leaving the city, having these natural experiences and these like amazing environments all over Southern California, and then having the opportunity to be, do something as American as looking at property and being able to possibly purchase something. I think it's like, the ultimate American dream for anyone, whether you're a designer, an architect, whatever it may be. I think that was something that fueled the idea of sitting through a 9-to-5.
I think it's your way of saying you appreciated all your friends with off-roading Jeeps and Range Rovers.
Exactly, yeah. Or any car that just moved. I mean, mine was a Mini Cooper at the time. That was a full and I dragged it through the dirt, mud, whatever you want to call it. So
yeah. Well, you did it. Speaking of doing it, and we'll elaborate this on future episodes, but you have designed beautiful spaces for many people and created unique experiences. Can you expound on this? Again, we're going to do specific episodes for some incredible projects that you've created, but can you expound on this expansion of your thought about having people experience up close and personal your designs?
Yeah, I think I always kept going back to my thesis work and what I did during my thesis work, and the thesis book that I wrote took a whole year traveling around the country to understand what my position in architecture was. And I was the youngest in my class at the time. I was, not the most versed in the sense that like I didn't have that much internship experience or didn't work in offices before. So I think for me, it was like trying to understand how to go back to my roots with my thesis and being able to work on the folly concept that I was developing at the time, and this idea of cohesion and integration of pragmatic and contextual relevancy, something we're diving into more and more in our studio, and kind of going back to our roots in regards to the importance of architectural space.
I think it's interesting too that these off-grid designs of gray water systems, I physically witnessed places getting remembered for the wells that you dug, and then the water being repurposed and all the acreage getting green. And we have had quite a bit of wildlife return to the ecosystems that you've helped remember and honor. We can expound on the mountain lions and the lynx and the Joshua Tree tortoises that have come along as we've expounded into further episodes. One of the things, again, from a human design standpoint, is we all have individual experiences and perspectives that we bring to our work. What is something that you've brought to your work that is a keynote for who you are?
I really love the idea of storytelling and narrating a storyline, curating environments through the constituents and the parameters that I set for myself in regards to designing a space, instead of it just being a traditional copy and paste home, whatever that may be. It doesn't have to be more expensive. It just has to be intentional. I think designing with intent and creating experiences through this idea of architecture as a medium for people to experience nature, and be able to circulate through spaces and different programs and move through space and feeling a certain way, whether it's conscious or subconscious, is really exciting for me, because that means I'm setting the footprint, and this you're going through the storyline that I'm creating through this idea of architecture and design. And I won't be there all the time when people are moving through the space, and being able to kind of get that feedback and how they react and respond to things at different moments as they move through the spaces is really, I think, a powerful element in setting the tone between just being in a shelter, which is a really important thing, but like also experiencing a shelter, experiencing this need of something that we, all inhabit for a lot of hours of our lifetime, and how they make you feel and what they do to you as a human being.
I have been astonished with some of the ideas that emanate from you, but what I've noticed is you stick to your guns. What is it about your gut intuition that drives you? What is that true statement that you're wanting to expound on?
I think it's important to, as cliche as it sounds, I think following your gut instinct in regards to making the right move, also making something I also tell myself in a more practical way is making informed decisions, understanding and what are the options, how have I researched each option, what is, if I do this, what will happen after that, and just focusing on the next right move, I think is really important, especially in something like architecture and building and construction. You have to be able to be, one of my professors always said, don't fall too in love with your concept. You have to be able to negotiate with it and develop it and allow for the process to happen. And I think that to me is a craft that people sometimes get too hung up on. And I think it's important to be able to negotiate with that and negotiate with yourself on how to problem solve through bringing something from a rendering to realizing an actual space that people move through. And sometimes creating and working through that process makes the outcome is something that might not necessarily be planned on paper. And it might trigger you in a different way. So I think that's really important as well.
A full circle moment to this episode is I have witnessed countless people experiencing your designs for the first time. And I would imagine it's very, very close to everybody's inner child showing up at Petra, because they're so in awe of the experience and the stargazing suites and satellites going by and absolutely experiencing the pure bliss of what you create, which we're going to expound on in future episodes. And we're obviously just scratching the surface, but I just think it's important that people really listen to this for their takeaways, their journeys, what are their origin stories. And so
100%. Yeah, I think what's really exciting also is creating a dialogue of, what I call like icebreakers, and being able to educate people on different aspects of architecture and lifestyle living, whether it's off-grid living, sustainable is like this like green label thing, that's terminology that's used all over the place by corporate culture. But I think it's really more important to educate people on what off-grid living is like and what that means and how to be self-sustainable in your own world, because if you're staying at one of my spaces that I've designed and created, whether it be in a desert environment or a mountain environment or on a farm or wherever it may be, the goal is to always create a dialogue for you to then, what's your takeaway, being able to be, hopefully leave inspired, whether it's to continue writing your book or to create your own space or to be able to take on this idea of being more self-sustainable and more self-sufficient, in an environment where we need to do that for ourselves and our planet.
Well articulated, and I think this is a good stopping point for our inaugural episode of Cohesion Concepts and Contexts. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Malek, and we'll see you guys again soon.
Yeah, thank you everyone for listening in, and excited to share more about what we do and our design process and all these various storylines that we have going on.
Thank you.